Good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you might be. My name is Kevin Michael Grace, and this is the Kevin Michael Grace Show. So here I am in Victoria in a hotel, trying to survive the COVID-19 panic, survive the nanny state. I guess we've learned some things from recent events. One is that for all the talk about liberty and freedom, we don't really care about it all that much. There are people everywhere bossing everyone around, snitching on people, and the experts say that that is what we need. So I guess we'll just have to put up with it. Stores are still open, at least where I live. And on Saturday, I got told off by two different officious women in two different stores. That I was waiting in line to get into one store, and this woman snapped at me that I was not standing in the right place. Well, where is the right place? Actually, it's 3 feet to your right, and it has a number 1 on it. Don't you get it? Can't you read? She didn't actually say that, but it was implied. Then I went to another store, and practically as soon as I entered, I got told off by some woman because I wasn't following the arrows. Are the arrows going to, are they permanent now? Are they going to stay? Outside every store of any size, there's a platoon of employees sanitizing baskets and directing the flow of traffic into the store. Is that going to stay too? Oh, you think you can just walk into the store, do you? Because we're open? No. It's not that simple. Not that simple at all. Peter Hitchens wrote yesterday, "It's been clear to me since at least September 11, 2001, that a lot of people in the modern world do not especially wish to be free. The ready acceptance of the presumption of guilt and the convict-like treatment of air travelers at first amazed me. Then I realized they liked it." Well, I certainly don't like it, and I have flown very little indeed in recent years, and I don't know, even if I had the money, even if there was a place that I particularly wanted to go, I don't know. I just can't stand, going to an airport and, oh, take your coat off, your overcoat, take your shoes off. Now bend over and attempt to put your shoes on. I don't know, perhaps they're all laughing at this. Of course, I definitely, I typically go to the airport looking like this. I found that people treat you better when you're wearing a jacket and tie, but at the airport, no, it doesn't matter at all. So, let's see. Someone named Matt Wookie congratulated himself on a tweet from April the 14th saying, "This is aged well remarkably quickly. This is what is meant by running hot." And he had earlier written, "At what stage does the government switch from concern about too many infections to concern about not enough infections? We're only weeks away from that stance, I reckon." I'm beginning to suspect that what we're seeing here is a controlled die-off. That, it may become necessary to cull the population at some point in the future. So let's have a try. Let's have a little experiment and see how it works. We know that cancer patients aren't getting treatment. Cancer surgeries have been suspended. Pretty much all so-called non-essential surgeries have been expended. And of course, the only thing that's essential now is COVID-19. And so people are dying. How many people are going to die as a result of this? I don't mean COVID-19. I mean because of the panic. We don't know, but it is going to be a rather large group of people. And again, may sound paranoid, But the alacrity with which our governments put us all into panic mode, despite the obvious consequences. Now, I'm sure that Dr. Anthony Fauci knows very well about the medical risks associated with the panic, but we'll get to him a little later. It's all necessary. Apparently, the curve has been flattened. Do you remember that? It seems like it was such a long time ago that we were told that gotta flatten the curve, gotta flatten the curve. Well, we flattened the curve. Can we go back to normal? No. We can never go back to normal. There is a new normal. What is that new normal? We're not going to tell you just yet. But rest assured, it's not going to be good. And I'll be talking in a little while about some of the hints about what that new normal might be. Alistair Hames tweets, just spoke at length to a guy who has been a vaccine researcher for 25 years, HIV. His best guess for COVID vaccine is 4 to 10 years. So make yourselves comfortable. Frederick responded, the whole idea of staying closed until a vaccine was ready was envisioned and sold by people who have no clue what vaccines are and how they are developed. There is no vaccine for the common cold. SARS has been a work in progress since 2003. MERS vaccine, nope. And of course, there's a possibility here for a calamity, which is this immense pressure for a vaccine to be developed. But we are assured that a vaccine won't be approved until we know that it's safe. Well, it's going to be difficult to hold back the vaccine or vaccines when we are told by Justin Trudeau and others that no, the lockdown has to continue until a vaccine is developed. Oh, yes. Let's look at the consequences. One of the economic consequences of the panic. Crude oil price on May contract goes negative for the first time, plummeting below negative $10 a barrel. Crude oil is down more than 160% on the day. So looks like we've smashed the oil industry. Now, some people are cheering about this. The climate emergency people are cheering. And, Alberta gets it in the neck, so that's a bonus for them because they hate Alberta with a passion. And we're just going to have no choice but to roll on the green revolution. Well, the green revolution, it simply doesn't supply enough power to keep our economy, to keep our civilization going. And obviously, the deep greens are quite pleased about this, because if you paid any attention to what these people are saying, or if you've seen any of these TV shows about, after the collapse of civilization, what we'd be looking at would be a vast Malthusian die-off of billions of people. But I suppose that would lessen the burden on Mother Earth. So, swings and roundabouts. Who else is being smashed? From the Wall Street Journal, sending hospitals into bankruptcy. The lockdowns are doing great unintended harm to medical providers. They make their money on surgeries and no surgeries. Now, there's just COVID-19 treatment. Let's see, dozens of elderly people were found dehydrated and malnourished in a nursing home in Dorval, near Montreal, Canada. 31 died. Most of the nurses had stopped coming to work for fear of COVID-19. Rorette Cayley says, great, more lives will be lost to the consequences of the overreaction than to the disease itself. I remember reading a discussion some weeks ago about just this very thing, that a large number of people, a majority of people who work in the medical profession now, they're simply employees. They have no particular attachment to their communities. It's just a job. It's not a profession. So, yes, let's see, nursing homes could be dangerous places. So we'll just stop going to work. And if the people there are on their beds, covered in their own waste, moaning and writhing or whatever, well, I guess the lesson there is don't get old. Nicole Safier, MD, writes, as unemployment approaches 20%, each 1% rise can result in a 3.3% spike in drug overdose, 1% increase in suicides. This from the National Bureau of Economic Research. If unemployment hits 32%, about 77,000 Americans will die as a result. Will economic fallout mortality be greater than the virus itself? I don't think that our leaders care. I think they know, but they don't care, because COVID-19 is an immediate problem, and COVID-19 deaths can be measured. Now, a lot of these deaths are faked, and we'll get into that in a minute, but it doesn't matter. There is a short-term crisis, and everything else must be put far, far in the rearview mirror. It's not important. Okay. Something from Alex Berenson. So someone had accused him of being callous. Brad Stolberg, serious question, and I hope you respond with seriousness too. COVID-19 has killed more Americans in 6 weeks than the flu does in a year, and that is with all the stark measures we've taken. Flu plus seems like an understatement. No, can you say more about what you mean? He responded, okay. I promised an answer, so here goes quickly. For several reasons, it is not true that COVID-19 has killed more Americans in 6 weeks than the flu does in a year. First off, on the most basic level, the flu kills as many as 60,000 plus people in some years. The 6 weeks versus year comparison is also misleading. Flu season is 17 to 20 weeks with short in-season peaks. Also, we are coding COVID deaths aggressively, and most people who die are elderly and ill. Knowing how many people died with rather than of COVID is impossible for now. Thus, the best death metric is all-cause mortality. The most recent available statistics show all-cause mortality has not increased in the U.S. this year. In fact, it has been lower than normal. Europe has seen a spike in the last couple of weeks comparable to a bad flu year. 4, many recent screens have shown that SARS-CoV-2 is far more widely spread than we realized, and thus much less dangerous. In New York, of pregnant women; in Massachusetts, of homeless people and the city of Chelsea; in Kansas, random screening; in California, semi-random screening; in Germany, random screening; and in France, career sailors. Thus, we don't actually know the true infection fatality rate of SARS, but it looks more and more like it will settle in the 0.15% to 0.4% range, and not everyone becomes infected, or 1.5 times to 4 times the flu. That rate will be the same whether or not we have lockdowns. They can slow the spread, but not stop it unless we continue them forever. The initial point of the lockdowns was to save the hospital system, but the hospital system is under no strain. So what is the point now? By the way, it is increasingly unclear that lockdowns, as opposed to moderate social distancing, work at all, but that's another thread. So the stock market took a hammering today. The Dow was down 592 points, that's 2.4%. And the VIX, which is the Frady Cat Index, was up 5.68 points, or 14.9%. I'm reading from CNBC. The oil price crash isn't as bad as it seems. Here's why. Yeah, oil has no value. It has negative value. That just seems really bad to me. The plunge in oil prices is the last thing Boeing and Airbus need right now. A plunge in fuel prices will only hurt demand for new planes, analysts say. Coronavirus live updates. Georgia governor says some businesses can reopen California town to test every resident. Amazon warehouse workers plan nationwide protest this week to demand coronavirus protections. Well, if everything is going to be, if Amazon adds a food service and they already own Whole Foods, it would be like that movie Freaked with Alex Winter. Giant conglomerate was called EES, everything except shoes, but of course Amazon does sell shoes. And I don't know, perhaps the more ubiquitous and powerful Amazon becomes, perhaps it's workers who are not treated very well. I don't know, perhaps they will be able to get more of what they want because, without its workers, what could Amazon do? I'm sure they're moving quickly to replace them all with robots, but that's not going to be possible. This was sent to Alex Berenson. I am a surgeon in New York City. I'm in private practice, and we are essential, but decided to close our practice until a future date. Until then, I signed up to work at the New York City public hospitals taking care of medical COVID patients. I don't know exactly how deaths are coded, but I can tell you that virtually every single ER admission to the hospitals are suspected COVID or COVID rule out patients, regardless of their symptoms or the reason for admission. For example, I would say half my patients right now are being ruled out and even treated for COVID, even though their symptoms are not consistent with COVID at all. To give one specific example, I currently have a patient who tested negative and has no symptoms of COVID, but is still listed under the COVID registry in the chart simply because they were tested. Obviously, I'm very limited on the amount of information I can give because of patient privacy concerns. I don't think this is necessarily some conspiracy to overinflate COVID numbers, but I do believe at this time COVID is on everyone's mind, and so people are assuming COVID is ultimately the reason everyone comes to the ER and gets admitted. So virtually all of them get tested and listed in the registry. I suspect they are counted as COVID hospitalizations, even if the reason that they are admitted is different. So on Tuesday, our unit had 36 patients. Today we have 27. Of those, only 13 are confirmed COVID patients. Of those, 11 were actually admitted because of COVID, which is a higher rate than usual. The other non-COVID patients were admitted for other medical reasons not related to COVID and have either tested negative or their tests are pending. Thanks again for all your hard work. COVID-19 is a bad disease, but I firmly believe the lockdowns ultimately do more harm than good, even here in New York City. Now, the Love Gov, Andrew Cuomo, what do you think is the possibility that he would ever admit that he overreacted to this? Well, I can answer that question for you. The possibility is zero. Whatever the results are, he is going to claim that he did the right thing, and his supporters are going to say, well, you see how much better he did than Trump, because Cuomo was in panic mode from the beginning, or at least until he was instructed to be in panic mode. Here's an example of the curse of Trump. Dr. William Kirby, the mayor of Auburn, California, who stepped down from his official position last week following intense backlash from a controversial Facebook post criticizing Donald Trump, died on April the 18th in a plane crash. He was 72. It was a single plane crash. Oh, and here is the post in which he said, good news for Trump supporters is that most of them already have masks. And there was a picture of a KKK member. How about that? Oh, yes, Trump is picking on the media. The TV stations have stopped, or several of them have stopped showing Trump's pressers. Oh, because there's no news there, it's irrelevant, et cetera, et cetera. Well, if you look at what CNN, MSNBC, et cetera, put on their stations, well, essentially they repeat the same stories every single hour, but little of it actually counts as news. I suspect the reason that they're not covering these pressers in their entirety is because they have come to realize, it's gotten through their thick skull, that these press conferences make the media look very bad indeed. What was it, on Friday or Saturday? A woman a Chinese woman, a native of China who works for CBS News, attempted to, a gotcha thrust at Trump, and Trump responded. And here I see someone saying that Trump was raging at CBS News reporter Waija and shouting how if he didn't act, tens of thousands might have died. Well, he wasn't raging. I mean, you can watch the video. And he was not shouting. Now, this person's called Stevie Z, and I thought, well, this must be a woman, but it turns out it's actually a man. But it is a man from Brooklyn. This is, I'm sure everyone has seen this, and not all women are guilty of this. But when a woman is angry with a man, she will frequently accuse him of shouting when he is not shouting. Keep your voice down. What do you mean, keep my voice down? I'm talking like this. Why do I need to keep my voice down? But no, the media looks like idiots here. And one gets the impression, that they're cheering for the coronavirus. Because the worse this gets, they figure the worse Trump's possibility of re-election is. Oh, Joe Biden. He actually tweeted this at a time when Trump is fanning the flames of white supremacy and hatred in our country. My heart is with the families of those we lost in the Oklahoma City bombing 25 years ago today. We must never give up the fight against these forces of hate and intolerance. Why don't you tell us again about your good friend, the late Senator Robert Byrd, Joe Biden, the man who was kind of a mentor to you when you entered the Senate by your own admission. Of course, Robert Byrd was famously a member of the KKK. Fanning the flames of white supremacy and hatred. So who's ever in charge of Joe's Twitter account is certainly woke. Is that the direction that his campaign is going to take? Because that would be too funny. This strange one here, April 18th from Joe Biden, as Kierkegaard said, faith sees best in the dark. Kierkegaard, Soren Kierkegaard, the Danish philosopher. Kierkegaard's books are famously recondite, and Joe Biden wasn't much of a student and certainly is not much of a reader. Yeah, Kierkegaard, gloomy fellow. In fact, apparently, I'm told this is true, that it was a taunt in Denmark for some time that people would say, don't be a Soren. That is to say, don't be a dismal Desmond like Soren Kierkegaard. What would be the attraction of Kierkegaard to Joe Biden? Would it be Kierkegaard's idea of the demonic in the erotic? Perhaps that would be it. James Kunstler says these are strange days indeed, but in what alternative universe can anyone imagine Joe Biden actually making it through a presidential election campaign? The party he supposedly leads stuffed him into a broom closet last week after he gibbered through a session with CNN's leading light, Anderson Cooper. They can't just hide the poor fellow there until November 3rd. Asked about reopening everyday life in America, Mr. Biden said, and this is a direct transcription of what he said, there's a, during World War II, where Roosevelt came up with a thing that, was totally different than he called it the World War II. He had the war production board. Keep in mind, Biden was reading from notes. Everybody knows he's dimmer than nightlight, and everybody's pretending it's okay. There is no analog in history for any faction putting up such an empty vessel for high office. Granted, the Democratic Party has trafficked in unreality for years, from Crossfire Hurricane through Ukraine Gate, with side trips like trannies and women's sports. But those capers were just old-fashioned scams. Joe Biden for president is emperor's new clothes caliber deceit, requiring a rank and file so marinated in falsehood that they couldn't tell you the difference between a red light and a green light. Picking Joe Biden as the instrument to block Bernie Sanders seemed especially dumb just weeks after the Democrats' impeachment gambit blew up in their faces by shining a fiercely revealing light on Joe and Hunter Biden's adventures in international grift. One can easily discern Biden's motive for remaining in the race after that, because sheltering in candidacy seemed to inoculate him from any criminal investigation. But did the whole party want to go all in on that? Then there is the sexual molestation charge against Biden by ex-staffer Tara Reade, who claims the then senator violated her manually in 1993. The New York Times editors sang la 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 la, kittens and puppies for 2 weeks before they even acknowledged the accusation, only dismiss it because, well, it was like, where Roosevelt came up with a thing that, was totally different from There are really only two plausible game plans for the Dems with Joe Biden. One is that he's a mere placeholder until the convention, assuming it can even be held, where party bigwigs are forced to undo their Biden blunder by some legerdemain of rules fudging and cram in a last-minute replacement. The putative savior would be none other than she whose turn was thwarted in 2016, on the grounds that she at least knows how to run for president, even if she isn't very good at it. They might as well hand every delegate a Dixie cup full of cyanide-enhanced Kool-Aid as they cast that faithful vote. The other pretty obvious scheme, seemingly underway now, is to fix up Biden with a running mate who can take over his duties 23 minutes after the inauguration ceremony. Stacey Abrams, the self-proclaimed real governor of Georgia, who in fact lost that election, but is made out nicely hustling her delusions, is campaigning arduously for the Veep appointment. Wouldn't that make a heck of an appealing ticket? I keep hearing about Stacey Abrams, who was the minority leader in the Georgia Senate. That's the highest that she's risen in politics. Stacey Abrams is a loud, angry, morbidly obese, closeted black lesbian. That this is supposed to be a plus? Oh, well, she'll appeal to these people. She'll appeal to the people who would vote for the proverbial yellow dog. Stacey Abrams. I don't know. I'm looking forward to it. I really am. It would just be too funny. Too funny. Let's see what's happening in the chat. Laramie Hirsch says, Kevin, is the petrodollar dead? Does that mean the U.S. economy is destroyed soon? Will there be bank runs? I don't know. Could all happen. Nobody really knows what is going to happen, because the assumption now is, Fed printer, brr, brr, right? Just keep that up forever. Obviously, America is better placed to do this than, say, my own country. Okay, yes, I was a little late today. I apologize. Vanilla Ice says, boomers think they are free, and this is the start of 1984. My consumer freedom is being infringed. I wouldn't make light of that, for the reason that Walker Percy explained in his book Lost in the Cosmos. With the destruction of traditional belief systems, consumerism is one of the most powerful beliefs in the world now. It is one of the things that people cling to in order to get through their miserable lives somehow. And if people are told, well, the consuming is over, what is it actually that binds people to other people, that binds people to their communities, to their nations? That's a question that governments don't really want the answer to. Okay, what else we got? Oh, a question about music. Hi, Kevin. I know you love Joy Division. What about orchestral maneuvers in the dark, flock of seagulls, psychedelic furs? I like OMD and psychedelic furs, flock of seagulls. I don't know them very well. They had a couple of hits. CanCon. Oh, how many decent bands have ever come out of Canada? What, is one hand sufficient? No. Chogan 666 says quarantine, lock up sick people, postmodern quarantine, lock up well people. Well, that is well put, I have to say. Lecomte de Boris said Trudeau went mad. No, this is very good for him, because he is particularly ill-suited to being prime minister. He's particularly ill-suited to any job that carries authority. He was reduced to minority government in the last election because his shtick had worn thin with the Canadian people. His relentless narcissism and his inability to represent, as the kids like to say, as an adult male. CBC radio show Brave New Waves. Yes, David Wisdom hosted that show. And at one point, his then wife, Carol Wisdom, was my boss at the University of British Columbia. Of course, if you live long enough in the same place, these sort of coincidences just become, kind of a commonplace. Let's see. Fly Angry Persian Michelin guy says my mom says she's going to take me to get tostada pizza and cheese fries from my favorite kosher pizza shop. I love my mommy. Well, that's always a good thing. On the news, they said someone had their leg amputated because of COVID-19, says Metal Mike. I don't really. Maybe they just threw that in as an extra. Lecomte de Boris says more than 75% of things around are made of oil. Yes. But I don't really expect people in the media or even people in government now to have any idea how wealth is created. KMG fancied himself as being really with it when he was in high school and uni. No, not really. Okay. What does GUM stand for? I used to know this. Jonathan Paul could certainly explain. Chogan King 666 says in New York City, as the virus wanes, the measures become more stringent. Mask now required. Line up for good shopping. At least an additional 2 weeks of no salary. Jonathan Paul says State Universal Store in Russia. Chogan King 666, Prime Minister nipple ring. Well, I've seen the pictures of Love Gov, Andrew Cuomo, and he definitely appears to have at least one nipple ring. His ex-live-in girlfriend has denied it, but she would, wouldn't she? British American says Cuomo has a simian visage, as KMG would say. He definitely does, but it's my belief that people seem to find the simian visage comforting. I mean, George W. Bush was frequently compared to a chimp, to a monkey, but he was elected president twice. Okay, British American, both his eyes and the alarmingly wide gap between nose and mouth are certainly of simian aspect. Okay, as Stephen Keaton called him, good old Kirky. I haven't read Kierkegaard, and it's a difficult read. There's nothing breezy about him at all. What red light is the district where Hunter Biden hangs out? Well, there's so many fascinating and disgusting stories, including the one about the hydrotherapist, the world-renowned hydrotherapist, and the rental car, and what the crack pipe found in it. That's just one, Jonathan Paul, the Guess Who, they had some good songs. Triumph, Blue Rodeo, Bachman Turner Overdrive. Yeah, Bachman Turner Overdrive had some good songs. Okay. Let's see. Okay, let's go back to this. Oh, yes, the suggestion that I was reminded of this watching Tiger King, that Joe Exotic, he claimed to have some sort of, apparatus which has a particular name, which I'm not going to mention. And I thought, why? Why would anyone do that to their wedding tackle? Apparently, some people do. So let's talk about a nightmare here. This is by Michael Walsh in the New York Post. How the Obamas could easily win 8 more years in the White House. And we're all looking forward to that, aren't we? As the President of the United States shelters in place with the White House press corps and Joe Biden gibbers senselessly into the GoPro camera in his Delaware basement, this fall's national election has been thrown into a cocked tricorn by the coronavirus. Many of Donald Trump's retail politics strengths, the huge rallies, his command of crowds have been neutralized. And while he still has control of the narrative from his bully pulpit in the West Wing, the national media remains dead set against him and puts the worst possible spin on every word he speaks. That's not necessarily a liability. Anyway, let's get to the Michelle part. Okay, so the choice is clear. Michelle Obama. Never mind that she has even less political experience than Hillary Clinton did when she ran for the White House and has long said she disdains public office. Currently, Michelle is in talks to possibly endorse Biden via a video and is said to be lending her name to a campaign fundraiser as early as next week. If she engages, God help Donald Trump, because she's tough as nails and enormously popular. Former Democratic Party chairman of South Carolina, Dick Harpootlian, said. Okay, tough as nails. Really? Tough as nails, because she's had a very hard life. She got accepted to Princeton when she shouldn't have been accepted to Princeton. Then she married Barack Obama, and she was given a well-paying job because Barack was in Illinois politics, and this was in the health field. When Barack left Illinois politics, the job was eliminated. It is true that Michelle Obama's memoir was a bestseller, but she represents an aspiration for a fair number of women. That is to say, to become rich and beloved without ever having done anything. It's an example of what I call soap opera economics. If you're familiar with the genre, some man dies, and the widow takes over his company. And, what do you know about the raisin business? And, well, how much is there to know? Are you saying that because I'm a woman, I can't run this company? Well, no, not exactly. We're saying you can't run this company because you have no experience of business. In fact, you have no experience of anything other than buying a lot of expensive things with your husband's money. But of course, the woman is always successful in this. And I think that there are a large number of women and some men who think, how hard could it be to run a company, to do anything, really? I mean, if I chose to do this, I'm sure I'd be really good at it. And this is what motivates the Michelle Obama supporters. Now, Michelle Obama, despite the fact that she has got an awful lot and she has contributed, well, nothing, she is exceedingly resentful against America, against white people. But she's not entirely dumb, because she has indicated that she has no interest in running for office. Because, she was First Lady of the United States, and First Ladies don't get picked on, well, if they're Democratic First Ladies. If you're Nancy Reagan or Melania Trump, yeah, then you get picked on. But she would be subject to attack, to ferocious attack, and she would be forced to explain, for instance, in debates, what her policy was, how she would intend to do things. How could she be president despite the fact that, of course, Trump had no political experience, but it was obvious from anyone who followed Trump that he had followed politics very closely for decades. And I don't think that Michelle Obama, I don't even think she could be bullied into doing it, because life is really good for her. She is, the most admired woman in the United States. Again, she has never done anything in her life. Oh, we all love Michelle Obama. Well, why exactly? Was it her frequent humiliation, verbal humiliation of her husband, saying all these nasty things or unpleasant or embarrassing things about him? Could it have been that? Could it have been her obvious gargantuan sense of entitlement? No, I just don't. I just don't see it. I don't see it happening. Bjorn Lomborg. New modeling report on corona in Stockholm shows infections peaked a couple of days ago. This was written yesterday. About 1/3 have been infected by now. In a month, corona infections will be almost over and Stockholm close to herd immunity. And you will recall that Sweden has not had a lockdown as other countries have had. There's still lots and lots of people in Sweden. They're not practicing social distancing. Interestingly, the deaths in Sweden are wildly disproportionately among, non-Swedes. And since the population of Sweden now is 20% non-Swedish recent immigrants, which is absolutely shocking, that's going to be significant. Lomborg also tweeted that day, the Oxford University Centre for Evidence-Based Medicine has updated its estimates of the fatality of corona. Case fatality rate is likely between 0.1 to 0.36%. So again, really not much worse than the flu. But a curious thing has happened. There's two classes of people on Earth now. There's a real binary division. There's the COVID people, and then there's the non-COVID people, like anyone cares about them. William Briggs writes today, many have asked me to comment on the new Atlantis article, not like the flu, not like car crashes, not like. My comment is, do high schools still show those nightmare-inducing driver training videos? You know the ones. Sally straps herself into a 2-ton murder missile on wheels, sets off for the dress boutique. She reaches down to adjust her heels and wham, chalk up one Sally and one innocent family of 4, who moments before were on their way to church to attend a rally for your favorite victim group, but who are now lazing all over the highway. 5 deaths. A mere 5 of the 37,000 people a year who end their fleshly careers fertilizing the flowers along our nation's highways and byways. One would not ordinarily dismiss as statistical artifacts tens of thousands of deaths that turn the stomachs of even grave-robbing vivisectionists, but these are not ordinary times. For now, the dreaded coronavirus is upon us. People who die from that bug are special. True, a flu victim and a coronavirus victim will often end their earthbound existences, strapped to gurneys, sucking oxygen from the only plastic straws still legal. And there will be as many flu victims each and every year as there will be coronavirus victims this year. But dying from the flu just isn't comparable. Why? Well, because we have not scared ourselves witless. This is a family blog, or else I would have used the more popular and much more accurate word by flu or car crash deaths, or heart attack or cancer or Ebola or Zika or giant Asian wasps, or indeed deaths of any kind. We often tell ourselves campfire stories about the ways to be pushed over the final cliff of life. Theses are excellent ways to relieve tedium and bring eyeballs to advertisements. Only this year, we took these morbid tales seriously. We have behaved like sugar-addled children. We don't dare crawl into bed before peeking under it to see if the escaped maniac axe killer with the hook for hand lurks there. Coronavirus victims die a martyr's death. People who die of other causes deserve what's coming to them or don't matter. Not only that, but everybody is now an expert on the statistics of causes of death. The reader may be surprised to learn that nobody knows how many people died of the flu last year, or the year before that, or any year. Nobody knows the exact number, that is. The best we can do is an estimate of the real number, a guess from a statistical model. In this pandemic year, as we have seen, the underlying condition is ignored, and the DBI, death batted in, of coronavirus is instead credited. Since the true tally of flu deaths is known, it has to be estimated. The idea is to plot up all deaths by this time, which looks like this in the CDC's latest weekly numbers, and you just see a recent crash. Ignore the plummeting at the end. That's probably because these are government-compiled numbers. As such, they suffer from delays. Almost certainly, these will pop back up in time after government employees diligently return to, I hesitate to write it, work. The yearly cycle with deaths peaking in winter is plain. We had a peak in January of this year, after which the curve started its downward course as usual. Lockdowns began in mid-March, after the decrease began on the downslope, suggesting that lockdowns were not as efficacious as those who used them to destroy the lives of millions are hoping. Imagine if they were wrong about that. Never mind, the CDC might adjust the January to March numbers higher. Who knows? They're beside the point for the moment. What happens with flu is that a model to fit the yearly cycle and to the upward trend, which you can also see, that's caused by population increase. These are not per capita numbers. And yeah, it is pretty much like the flu. Let's see, the way the picture is constructed makes the dreaded coronavirus look worse, and not only worse, but far worse than the 1957 to 1958 Asian flu. This is asinine. Asian flu, the estimates tell us, slaughtered some 2 million souls. 2 million. It's not over, but the dreaded coronavirus looks like it might tie with 2009 swine flu, which isn't even pictured. Swine flu estimates are between 152 and 575,000 dead, with a median of 364,000. The 1968 Hong Kong chop suey flu isn't pictured either, which rubbed out an estimated 1 million. These omissions matter, as does the breathless, hand-wringing daily reporting of dreaded coronavirus numbers. Imagine if the Asian flu's numbers were reported daily and for months on end, accompanied by nonstop media coverage. The terror which strikes our hearts would be 4 times worse, at least. Why we choose this bug to collectively lose our minds over and not other deadlier ones is, of course, the real question. Let me know your theories. Well, I have advanced one hypothesis, which is that this is perhaps a controlled die-off. I suppose it's you remember, this is a test of the emergency warning system. Well, I guess this is a test of the martial law system. You know, the old joke about Canadians. How do you get 50 Canadians out of the pool? Get out of the pool, Canadians. Well, apparently this appears to be a universal principle. So the governments have discovered they can strip even the most basic civil rights from everybody. And the experts say that this is necessary. I'll be talking on Friday on the book club about Matt Stoller's book, Goliath. And I was quite taken by this passage. And it's about the difference between the philosophy of Theodore Roosevelt and Woodrow Wilson. Wilson pledged to break up monopolies and attacked Roosevelt's plan of putting together a board of experts to govern monopolies. What I fear, said the Princeton professor, is a government of experts. Well, that's what we have now, isn't it? A government of experts. And it turns out that experts don't like people exercising their freedom, even if it means, you know, walking in the park or laying down on the grass. Hospitals overwhelmed by flu patients are treating them intense. Oh, don't you mean COVID-19 patients? No. This is from Time magazine, January 18, 2018. The 2017-2018 influenza epidemic is sending people to hospitals and urgent care centers in every state, and medical centers are responding with extraordinary measures, asking staff to work overtime, setting up triage tents, restricting friends and family visits, and canceling elective surgeries, to name a few. How about that? I've complained in the past that one of the reasons that the news media is in such a parlous state was that pretty much all the editors were fired. And one of the things that an editor does is that when someone comes in with, with some breathless idea, the editor says something like, this has happened before. It's happened several times before. There's nothing particularly novel about this. But no, COVID-19, the coronavirus, is unlike anything that has ever happened before. This is from unheard.com, and it's an interview of Professor Johan Giesecke, one of the world's most senior epidemiologists, advisor to the Swedish government, the first chief scientist of the European Center for Disease Prevention and Control, and an advisor to the Director General of the WHO. So I think we can state with certainty that this fellow is a certified expert. What does he think? The UK policy on lockdown and other European countries are not evidence-based. The correct policy is to protect the old and the frail only. This will eventually lead to herd immunity as a byproduct. The initial UK response before the 180-degree U-turn was better. The Imperial College paper was not very good, and he has never seen an unpublished paper have so much policy impact. The paper was very much too pessimistic. Any such models are a dubious basis for public policy anyway. The flattening of the curve is due to the most vulnerable dying first as much as the lockdown. The results will eventually be similar for all countries. COVID-19 is a mild disease and similar to the flu, and it was the novelty of the disease that scared people. The actual fatality rate of COVID-19 is in the region of 0.1%. At least 50% of the population of both the UK and Sweden will be shown to have already had the disease when mass antibody testing becomes available. So, I mean, if it's a question of, experts, the experts say, well, this fellow, again, Professor Johan Giesecke, he's very much an expert, and he thinks that this is all nonsense. I talked about Dr. Scott Jensen, who's a physician and a Minnesota state senator, and he's in the news again. He had said that Medicare is paying hospitals $13,000 for patients admitted with COVID-19 diagnoses and $39,000 if those patients are placed on ventilators. Seems like quite an incentive there to put patients on ventilators, doesn't it? Even though everything that I've seen suggests that you do not want to be put on a ventilator because it means you will shortly thereafter be dead. So, here's another report from a physician, Dr. Lee Fisher. I'm a family physician who graduated med school in 1972 and practiced family med in West Palm Beach for 31 years. During that time, I signed hundreds of death certificates. For the last 25 plus years, I've reviewed and testified in hundreds of medical negligence cases. In the last 5 years, 90% involved nursing home negligence. Obviously, many of these nursing patients died, so I review a lot of death certificates. I can tell you that more often than not, the cause of death listed bears no resemblance to the actual cause. Many doctors still list cardiorespiratory arrest as the cause of death. Well, everyone dies of that in the end. Or they will list dementia, but what mechanism actually causes the death in dementia patients? I believe that doctors are using death by COVID-19 as a convenient diagnosis when they don't really know what caused their death. Unless someone has tested positively for the virus and had symptoms and died, there is no way to attribute their death to COVID-19. As you point out, the number of deaths due to the pandemic is highly inflated and, in my opinion, for political gain. This was a letter sent to Alex Berenson. So we find out that in Minnesota, the state of Minnesota, physicians there are being urged to list cause of death as COVID-19 when there is no testing and no symptoms. Do you think the fix is in? Perhaps. So Scott Jensen has become a minor celebrity in America, and something must be done about this. There's a long piece in the Minneapolis Star Tribune as Minnesota senator cast doubt on COVID-19 death tolls, conspiracy theorists pounced online. Dr. Jensen has provided the documentation to prove what he's saying, that the CDC wants physicians to list COVID-19 as a cause of death, even when there's been no testing, and now statewide, even when there's no symptoms. Does that sound like a conspiracy to you, or does it sound like something wicked? Let's see. State Senator Scott Jensen, a Chaska Republican and physician, got more attention than he bargained for this month after calling into question federal guidelines for attributing deaths to COVID-19. Jensen, sometimes mentioned as a possible 2022 gubernatorial candidate, voiced fears that doctors could start overdiagnosing the virus and inflating its death toll in a series of interviews with television personalities from North Dakota to Fox News in New York. His words quickly went viral around the globe and found new life, fueling conspiracy theories and disinformation about the coronavirus across fringe, far-right websites. I don't know, Alec Berenson doesn't strike me as being far-right, to give one example. But obviously, if someone is on the right, then their opinion is disqualified. And just reporting facts, with documentations, attaching PDFs, well, I mean, that's irresponsible. It's absolutely irresponsible. One of Jensen's earliest interviews on the subject with Fargo TV host Chris Berg gained significant traction among followers of the QAnon conspiracy theory, which claims that a worldwide network of satanic pedophiles controls a deep state pulling the levers of government. Well, actually, the deep state exists, and it's been celebrated in recent months by people associated with the FBI and CIA. Thank God for the deep state, because they kept that maniac Trump in place. So now they're going back to the position that the deep state doesn't exist. A Facebook page affiliated with the QAnon movement shared a link to Jensen's interview with its more than 144,000 followers with the comment, "What is the primary benefit to keep public and mass hysteria re COVID-19? Think voting. Are you awake yet?" That's a very reasonable suggestion, because the Democrats are saying, no, we shouldn't have people go to balloting places anymore. It's unsafe. Even in November, it'll be unsafe. You gotta have everyone vote by mail, which is notoriously fraud-ridden. InfoWars, a conspiracy news site, which recently claimed that the coronavirus is a man-made bioweapon meant to stoke panic. Well, the U.S. military is looking into the charge that it is man-made. There is one of the world's most advanced biolabs in Wuhan. Are we supposed to, reading the story, you're supposed to pretend that we don't know any of this? Jensen said, well, fear is a great way to control people, and I worry about that. This is obvious. This is a truism. How is this controversial? Jensen said he began speaking out after taking a closer look at new federal guidance added this month for physicians and medical examiners on when to declare COVID-19 as a cause of death. In one television interview, Jensen was asked why he thought the government would want to skew the COVID-19 death toll upward. "I worry that sometimes we're just so interested in jazzing up the fear factor," he replied. Jensen has also suggested that each state's share of COVID-19 deaths could at some point in time, powerfully impact the allocation of federal funds. Again, this is perfectly reasonable. Though not addressing Jensen specifically, Dr. Anthony Fauci. See, look at this, Ravel-like choral music. The sainted Dr. Fauci, who of course is the director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases and a leader of the national COVID-19 response. I think it falls into the category of something that is very unfortunate, these conspiracy theories that we hear about. The fact that the Centers for Disease Control has issued guidance to all physicians in the United States, encouraging them to attribute the cause of death to as many people as possible with COVID-19, that is not a conspiracy theory, that is a fact. State Health Commissioner Jan Malcolm, meanwhile, described the latest federal guidance as a measure to better define the scope of the pandemic. A Star Tribune review of 63 COVID-19 related death records in Minnesota suggests that doctors in the state are taking a conservative approach to attributing deaths to the virus when test results weren't available. There's no test results, but they're just going to ascribe it to COVID-19. Anyway, that sounds really conservative. Does it not? Andy Slavitt, a Minnesota resident and former acting administrator of the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, said that without evidence, accusations of falsifying data for financial gain has the appearance of trying to fit in a conclusion you want to reach. Slavitt says that the U.S. is instead still hamstrung by a significant amount of underreporting and under-testing of the virus. These people don't want testing of any kind because it will show that the majority of people have been exposed and that very few people have gotten sick, and that the death rate is somewhere between 0.1% and 0.4%. Russians alerted. In a coordinated effort akin to information warfare during the 2016 presidential campaign. Are they still sticking with that one? Thousands of Russian-linked social media accounts have been deployed to spread fear about COVID-19. Experts say Russian, Iranian, and Chinese actors have been waging disinformation campaigns to distract from their own challenges while sowing doubt about the U.S. response to the pandemic. Russia Today, a Kremlin-powered global television network, also used Jensen's statements to Fox News host Laura Ingraham to punctuate a story questioning New York's COVID-19 death count. We're going to undermine the public trust, Jensen said in the interview, warning that trust in politicians is already wearing thin. Just so. Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, that's controlled by the Canadian government. The BBC is controlled by the British government. No, but RT, that's the real outlier there. He's basically saying that doctors are lying about death, said State Representative Alice Mann, a Democrat from Lakeville, who is also an emergency room physician. No, that's not what he's saying. He's saying that they are being bullied into ascribing deaths to COVID when there is, one, no testing, and two, not even any symptoms. This story, which is written by Stephen Montemayor, this is why people hate the media. Oh, speaking of the media, Brian Stelter of CNN. He's a broken man. Last night I hit a wall, gutted by the death toll, disturbed by the government's shortcomings, dismayed by political rhetoric that bears no resemblance to reality, worried about friends who are losing jobs, kids who are missing school, and senior citizens who are living in fear. I crawled in bed and cried for our pre-pandemic lives, tears that had been waiting a month to escape. I wanted to share it because it feels freeing to do so. Now is not a time for faux invincibility. Journos are living this, hating this, like everyone else. A grown man wrote this. I was in the news business for many years, and one of the things you deal with in the news business is death. Lots and lots of death. And that's the reason why you used to find amongst journalists a highly advanced gallows humor. Just if you've ever known any nurses, they also engage in gallows humor as well, because they're, surrounded by sickness and death, But Brian, he crawls into bed and cries. Wow. What a sad, pathetic man. Let's hear from some celebrities. Kevin Sorbo, who's an actor. Doesn't he play He-Man roles, or used to? I understand he's a director and producer as well. Everybody please wake up. When the state tells you it's safe to go to Home Depot to buy a sponge, but dangerous to go and buy a flower, and when the state shuts down millions of private businesses but doesn't lay off a single government employee, it's not about your health. And, oh, Patton Oswalt, who's really determined to make me hate him. I think he's a funny man, a talented actor. But this is what he tweeted 2 days ago. Anne Frank, where are you going with this, buddy? Anne Frank spent 2 years hiding in an attic, and we've been home for just over a month with Netflix, food delivery, and video games, and there are people risking viral deaths by storming state capitol buildings and screaming, "Open Fuddruckers." Is the suggestion here that Hitler is the good guy of this scenario? Because, he forced the deplorables to hide. Is that the suggestion? Also, Fuddruckers. Yeah, Patton Oswalt wouldn't be caught dead at a Fuddruckers. Oh, Patton Oswalt eats what? Some sort of Portuguese Guinea infusion, I'm guessing. Something like that. Curt Schilling, the great baseball pitcher, who for some reason is not yet in the Hall of Fame. Could it have something to do with his politics? I think it does. He responded, "STFU Frodo. Most of this country despises you and all that you stand for. You're the definition of entitled white trash. You have Netflix, food delivery, video games, and little boys at your disposal. Much of this working nation lost their jobs, paychecks, and more." I've talked about the matriarchy, the monstrous regimen of women, and then I read in the Daily Mail that there's Sarah Silverman out on her balcony hammering a pot with tongs. Why would you use tongs to do that? Why not a big spoon? She is barking out orders from her balcony to people on the streets and in neighboring apartment buildings through a megaphone or a loud hailer, as the British would say. Wash your hands, floss your teeth. Death comes in through the gums. Really? That's it? So it's come to this, that Sarah Silverman is just loving this because I suspect, in any normal time, people would be screaming obscenities at her, shut the hell up, and much, much worse. But she's on the side of the experts, and she's a celebrity. Matt Walsh tweets, "Insane. Police are using drones to enforce social distancing by spying on Americans in their backyards. Police chief says invasion of privacy is worth it if it saves one life. At a certain point, even the most obsequious bootlickers will have had enough." Well, if it saves only one life, perhaps we should take guns away from the police. Because, if police didn't have guns, then obviously it would save more than one life. So this is in, New Jersey. Are they going to offer to get rid of their guns? If it saves one life, anyone who says that is a moron and cannot be taken seriously. Walsh followed up, "If a drone is spying on you while you're sitting in your backyard, you'd be well within your moral rights to shoot that piece of junk right out of the sky." Okay, so let's have another look at the chat, see what's going on there. Alex Dillard says it's only the May West Texas Intermediate contract that's negative. June WTI is $20. Why is Sarah Silverman relevant? Oh, I don't know. Ever since she entered the business, there's a lot of powerful people who've been stands, I remember her, she had a role as a writer on the Larry Sanders Show. I thought, okay, she's all right, But then it turned out that she had, serious opinions, and her opinions are, bad. Yes, Patton the Widowmaker. Oswald. I keep hearing this. I'm sure there's nothing to it. Jonathan Pohl says the temptation to break OPEC quotas is too great for corrupt third worlders to resist. Ultra testosterone. Why is Biden so senile? He's really old. Is he 78 years old? I mean, that is really old. There's a story. Well, there's a tale told. I guess it's an old Muslim tale in Solzhenitsyn's novel Cancer Ward about how Allah had given man X amount of years, and he demanded more, and so this was taken from other animals. And I don't remember the whole thing, but that it was taken from a horse, from a monkey, or whatever, and that so he would have to, man would have to spend 10 years laboring like a horse, and the final indignity was the last 10 years screeching like a monkey. 78 is really old. Matt Forney says drones are a joke. When the Israelis sold advanced drones to the Azeri army for use in the Nagorno-Karabakh war, the Armenians were able to shoot them out of the sky with Soviet hunting rifles. That sounds like a lot of fun, actually. Ultra Testosterone says, did you see that Stanford says COVID-19 mortality rate is about 0.1 to 0.2% total? Okay. Yeah, I've seen similar reports. But here's the thing. We go back to the Spartan rule. Again, Val Kilmer is, trying to understand how it's possible for the president's daughter to be declared dead when she's not dead. And he asks a White House aide, how do they fake the DNA? And she says they don't fake the DNA. They just issue a press release. And that's what it comes down to. The government is not going to admit that they went nuts, that they scared hundreds of millions of people to death, that they wrecked the economy, that they atomized society, and they stripped us of our civil rights over nothing. They are not going to do that. Because if they did that, oh God, they would be persecuted for the rest of their lives. They'd have to go into hiding. And then there would be the lawsuits. So no, it's not going to happen. It's simply not going to happen. That they are going to maintain that not only were the deaths not overcounted, they were undercounted. Maybe it was millions of people who died. Maybe, but they have a problem with that because, as I say, 2017, the last year for which there are detailed records, American records, cause of death, about 2.8 million people died. And that number is a hard one to fake. It really is a hard one to fake. That, you're going to claim that 50, 60, 70, 80% of people died of COVID? What about all of the people who die through suicide and homicide? What about all the people who die in automobile accidents and other accidents? Are they going to be ascribed to COVID as well? Well, maybe they are. I would not be surprised. This is from the Boston Globe. Nearly 1/3 of 200 Chelsea, Massachusetts residents who gave a drop of blood to researchers on the street this week tested positive for antibodies linked to COVID-19, a startling indication of how widespread infections have been in the densely populated city. 64 residents who had a finger pricked in Bellingham Square on Tuesday and Wednesday had antibodies that the immune system makes to fight off the coronavirus, according to Massachusetts General Hospital physicians who ran the pilot study. The 200 participants generally appeared healthy, but about half told the doctors they had at least one symptom of COVID-19 in the past 4 weeks. Well, there could be all manner of reasons for that. People who smoke tend to cough. Not all the time, but they will typically cough several times in a day, and that counts as a COVID-19 symptom. But my point in bringing up this story is simply that, look, an enormous number of people have been exposed to this virus, which means that the death rate is quite low. So I mentioned last week that in a skating park, sand was dumped in order to render it useless. I don't know what is the proper punishment for officials that would do something like that. But the government filled the skate park with sand, so the skaters turned it into a dirt bike track. Bravo. That is really great stuff. Anti-Gnostic comments, people wishing the wrath of coronavirus on these little rascals are going to be disappointed. They're young, non-obese, and physically active. Odds are very low they'll get infected from this activity, and even lower that they will die from it, even though I suspect that there are a great many people wishing coronavirus on them. And the protests. Residents protest coronavirus stay-at-home orders in 5 states: Colorado, Illinois, Florida, Tennessee, and Washington. I like this sign: give me liberty or give me COVID-19. In Washington State, a gathering in state capital Olympia dubbed Hazardous Liberty Defend the Constitution calls on Governor Jay Inslee to rescind the state's stay-at-home order. Washington, which had the first confirmed case of the novel coronavirus in the U.S. in January, now has more than 11,800 confirmed cases. In Illinois, protesters shouting, "Open Illinois," took to the steps of the Lincoln statue in Springfield as part of the national Operation Gridlock movement. The state has more than 30,300 confirmed cases. In Denver, protesters carried signs that said all jobs are essential and dangerous freedom over government tyranny. This is really separating the sheep from the goats here. Because, again, these people, oh, well, the experts have spoken, so, again, all of this bad things has to happen indefinitely. I don't want to hear any of these people ever again talk about liberty, freedom, all that kind of stuff. And I want these people to be called out every single time they start mewling about freedom, liberty, the Constitution, and the like, because they're completely phony. Oh my God, you're all going to die. Okay, just suspend all the rights. Just suspend all the rights. We can't have rights if people are going to die. If it saves one life. Oh, Dr. Fauci. Ooh. Heavenly music for Dr. Fauci. Amid growing unrest in several states about the ongoing lockdown, Dr. Fauci is urging protesters not to demonstrate, arguing that a premature reopening would backfire. Appearing on Good Morning America Monday, George Stephanopoulos, who, by the way, was a dinner guest of Jeffrey Epstein after he got out of prison, asked the infectious disease expert what his message is for those who have been protesting. I think the message is that clearly this is something that is hurting from the standpoint of economics, from the standpoint of things that have nothing to do with the virus. But unless we get the virus under control, the real recovery economically is not going to happen. Well, I suggested earlier in the show that Fauci obviously knows that decisions such as the ones he have been involved in have secondary consequences. Maybe he doesn't understand this. Maybe he's much less bright than people have given him credit for. I mean, okay, so people not getting cancer treatment, people not getting cancer operations, I mean, that's going to lead to more deaths, isn't it, Dr. Fauci? Oh, you don't say. I mean, this is the same fellow who said that, oh no, we can't have handshaking ever again. Oh, by the way, but if you want to hook up on Grindr for some anonymous sodomy, that's cool. That's cool. Just use your best judgment. Let's see. Rallies have taken place outside of several state capitals over the past few days. Notably, outside the Texas Capitol building in Austin on Saturday, a sizable crowd gathered and chanted "Fire Fauci." Infowar founders Alex Jones was among the protesters in attendance. So I guess that disqualifies it, right? California not close to easing measures. LA deaths hit record. California reported 87 new deaths from the coronavirus outbreak, one of the highest daily fatality counts so far, as the governor says that the state may not be close to loosening measures imposed to curb the spread. The total death toll was 1,072. How many people live in California? Isn't it close to 40 million people? It's close to 40 million people. There's 1,072 dead. I can just see how catastrophic this is and unprecedented. The number of cases claimed 5.3%, while patients in intensive care fell by a modest 0.1%, he said. We have certainly flattened the curve, Newsom said. Wasn't that the point at which life starts to go back to normal after the curve has been flattened? I suspect that politicians are going to deny that they ever said this. Newsom continued, for those who think that we're out of the woods, heaven forfend, those who think we've turned the page, those who think we can go back to the way things used to be, I caution you on the basis of that 87 number. 87 people die in California, and you can't have civil liberties in California anymore. You see how easy it's turned out to be? The government of experts that Woodrow Wilson warned against? Yeah. And Gavin Newsom, handsome governor of California, I suppose, is being talked about as a potential replacement for Joe Biden. Newsom tells protesters of stay-at-home order he will be swayed by science, not politics. I just want to encourage people that when you practice your free speech, which I don't embrace, I celebrate, just do so safely. The virus knows no political ideology. It doesn't know if you're Republican or Democrat, supporting the president, opposing the president, so practice physical distancing. Make sure that you are not infecting others. Even if you feel healthy and have no symptoms, you can spread this. We are going to do the right thing, not judged by politics, but by science. Well, as I pointed out throughout this show and many other shows, there are many, many top experts who say this is nonsense. And in fact, it's counterproductive, not only because of the whole destroying the economy, destroying society, destroying civil liberties thing, but what you want to get is to a condition of herd immunity, and the policies that have been adopted by Western governments do not allow that to happen. From Reason, a teenager posted about her COVID-19 infection on Instagram. A deputy threatened to arrest her if she didn't delete it. This woman is called Amaya Cohoon, 16, a student at Westfield Area High School in Westfield, Wisconsin. So she went on a camping trip, Disney World and Universal Studios on spring break. She began developing symptoms associated with COVID-19. She sought medical assistance, but at the time they were unable to test her to see if she was infected. She was diagnosed with an upper respiratory infection with symptoms consistent with COVID-19, according to her lawsuit. Cohoon went home and posted on Instagram letting people know she had COVID-19 and was in self-quarantine. Her condition worsened and she was brought to the hospital for treatment. She posted again about the experience on Instagram. Finally, they were able to test her, but the test came back negative. According to the lawsuit, doctors told her it was likely she missed the window for testing positive, but she probably did have COVID-19 despite the test results. One would think that getting a negative response, something like this, would be highly gratifying. But no. I know I have COVID. I demand to be certified as COVID-19. I demand it. I don't want to be one of those nobodies without COVID-19. So the Z-Man wrote 4 days ago about Asians complaining that they're being picked on. And he suggests that people aren't interested, or there's going to be very little sympathy for them, because it's not as if, they were slaves or anything like that. He writes, without the burden of slavery or low human capital, it seems like a hard sell to convince whites to feel guilty toward Asians. In fact, the result of such an effort could very well be the opposite. A resentment toward an ungrateful minority of visitors. Asking Africans to head back to their ancestral homeland is unreasonable. Asking Asians to go back to their homelands is not so unreasonable. Korea is a sparkling first world country, so if Koreans are unhappy in America, planes leave daily for Seoul. Then there is that China problem. It is highly probable that China poisoned the world, causing massive damage and suffering. Maybe it was an accident. Maybe it would have happened anyway, but the evidence is clear that China lied to the world about the nature of this virus and where it started. No amount of special pleading can cause white people to overlook this. Western politicians, despite their lunacy, will have no choice but to address the China problem, even if that makes the other Asians sad. It's not just the virus or the lying about it. People forget that the Chinese tried to poison the world's pets a few years back. In 2007, many brands of cat and dog foods had to be recalled due to contamination with melamine. The Chinese also poisoned our toothpaste with toxic chemicals. Go way back, and we have the expression sandbagging, from the way dishonest Chinese tea merchants tried to cheat at their European customers. This is what's called a pattern of behavior. To Westerners, Asian habits are barbaric, but not primitive. Again, Asians are not backward people like Africans. Asians know better, but choose to eat dogs and cats and turn pests into bizarre delicacies. They choose to poison our pet food. With choice comes responsibility. If Asians choose to do these things, then the West has no choice but to turn its back on them. There was a concert, an all-star virtual concert for the World Health Organization, that august institution that everyone loves. They had COVID-19 right from the start. That's not a big problem. That it cannot be communicated from person to person. That the real problem is xenophobia and stigmatization. Let's see. Taylor Swift, Paul McCartney, the Rolling Stones, Beyonce, who did not perform, Oprah Winfrey, Idris Elba, Lizzo, can never get enough of that woman, and Lady Gaga, who gushed that WHO Director General Tedros Adhanom was a superstar. And there's a picture of Michelle Obama looking tired, I have to say. And this Daily Mail story reports that a lot of people, well, people they could find on Twitter and Facebook, were furious about this. The WHO lied and people died. Research and think for yourselves, people. We need useless celebrities preaching to us how this isn't China's fault, and how we should just live as one nation. One scathing Amazon review of the concert read, adding the crude abbreviation BS. That one world together at home commie propaganda sponsored by the CCP, WHO, and the Global Citizen bullcrap is on at least 20 different stations, tweeted Charles Langworthy, a Republican running for Congress in Michigan. You can take your commie propaganda and shove it. This is America. We are not global citizens. We are American citizens. Curiously, Michelle Obama and Laura Bush, the homicidal librarian, former First Lady, they're very close to this effort, and they identify themselves as global citizens. Not first as American citizens, but first as global citizens. So at a time of, such a crisis, you wouldn't want to put your own country first. Billie Eilish, and as usual, looking hopped up on Goofenthal, was there. Lizzo, I don't want to look at that woman. And then there's, the commie PhD, Tedros. He delivered a video address during the concert, which drew particular backlash. One world together at home. Oh, just shut up. Oh, and someone has put together a little illustration of him as a baby with his arms wrapped around the president of China. It just, it's remarkable, really, that all the celebrities support the WHO. You'd think there'd be a few holdouts, right? It's not even necessary to just say that, the WHO botched this and that, they're in the pockets of the communist Chinese. How about just not taking part in the concert? Oprah Winfrey, a very, very caring person. Of course, she was very close to Harvey Weinstein. You know, yeah. Okay, enough of that. Enough of that nonsense. Very, very scary. This is from the Daily Beast. Officials dumbfounded as Florida beaches open 3 days after death spike. Hashtag Florida morons. Oh, this story is by Emily Sugarman, gender reporter. Oh, so they got the gender reporter actually reporting real news. That's how much of a crisis this is. This move is so dumb that I had to make sure it wasn't fake news. One city commissioner tweeted, "You guys, it isn't fake news." Oh dear, and there's a picture of Floridians walking on the beach on a cloudless day. This is just absolutely shocking. Shocking behavior. Jacksonville Beach opened 26 minutes ago. This is a live picture, and already there appear to be, I don't know, a few hundred people on one stretch of the beach. Miami Mayor Francis Suarez, who contracted coronavirus himself, called the reopening in Jacksonville very concerning, adding that Florida was not out of the woods yet. Was this on the memo? Not out of the woods yet? Flattened the curve, but not out of the woods yet. When they talk about the curve flattening and the curve descending, we have still not seen a major dissension. Dissension? What we're seeing is more of a plateau in the state of Florida. Yeah, but it was flattening the curve, and the curve's been flattened. And I'm concerned that if we're not careful, we could see another flare-up. South Africa, riots and looting in Cape Town as Africa suffers 1,000 coronavirus deaths. This is from the London Sun. Looters raided shops, attacked each other, the army and police, after breaching one of the strictest lockdowns in the world, this amidst chronic food shortages. South Africa is, I don't know, that's a country that can come to pieces at any time. Absolutely any time. From Bloomberg, Germany to reopen stores and first step toward post-virus era. The restrictions have been a threat to our existence as a business, said Philip Fraser, whose sales slumped by 90%. He owns a bed and mattress store in southern Germany in March, while costs only went down by a third. Fraser can get back to business after Chancellor Angela Merkel's government allows smaller stores to reopen after a shutdown that deprived German retailers of 30 billion euros in sales and pushed many shops to the brink of bankruptcy. Germany is among the first nations in Europe taking cautious steps toward normalcy as the pandemic continues to shutter factories, restaurants, and shops from Madrid to Prague. Oh, in Britain, Boris Johnson to publicans drop dead. Again from the London Sun, pubs could stay closed until Christmas, as they'll be the last to reopen when coronavirus lockdown ends. Cabinet Office Minister Michael Gove refused to rule out the possibility yesterday. He said locals would be among the last to reopen after the COVID-19 lockdown. In London, I've read that the price of real estate is so high that this leads to like your pint of beer being extraordinarily expensive. What, £6-7 now, more perhaps, with the result that people buy cheap alcohol at Tesco's or wherever and get hammered before they go to the pub. And again, you have a situation where something like public houses are closed for months, and then people get out of the habit of going to them. And then when it becomes possible for them to go back, they say, I don't think so. Got used to a life without pubs. And so, you know, Boris Johnson has taken the opportunity to kill a venerable British institution. It was suggested to me that his live-in girlfriend, Carrie Simons, who is now pregnant, has put him on a no-alcohol vegan diet. Well, if he is truly a vegan, this would explain why he is looking, why he's looked so wan in recent weeks, why he looks like, well, he has lost his spirit. I can't say that I'm an admirer of Boris Johnson or ever have been, but there was something about him, you know, his high spirits, which commanded respect, but he just now seems like a broken man. I warned people months ago that Kerry Simons is a woke millennial, and so none of this is surprising. I guess Boris thought, what, it would be possible for him to live with a woke millennial and not have his life turned upside down? Well, as they say, there's no fool like an old fool. Ireland could keep pubs, bars, and sports venues closed for 18 months until a coronavirus vaccine is found. Seriously, the Irish people are going to put up with this? Yeah, again, you know, it's a bad thing for people to get together with other people. You just stay home and, you know, drink out of your cans at home. You know, society is overrated. I'm looking at a picture of the cover of today's London Sun. Little Mix in 100 million gig for heroes. Little Mix is this put together a pop group. This is, I can't remember the name of this strange mixture of a woman. She is not what you would call sightly. Her face is very odd, very strange, but we've all been told how tremendously sexy she is, and it would be racist to disagree. Let's see, according to Toby Young's lockdown skeptics, Boris, or Al Johnson, as Peter Hitchens calls him, because that is his name, that is what his family and friends call him. Boris is cautious about easing the lockdown, with his overriding concern being to avoid a second wave of infections. Does this mean Professor Neil Ferguson's proposal for intermittent social distancing, whereby we relax some of the restrictions in short time windows, then reimpose them when case numbers rebound, has been rejected? That was put forward in Ferguson's March 16th paper as the only viable alternative to leaving the lockdown in place until a vaccine becomes available. Bad news on that front, too. On Saturday, all the papers got excited about the fact that a vaccine might be available by September. Sarah Gilbert, Oxford's professor of vaccinology, announced she was 80% confident it would work, and trials are about to get underway. But yesterday, Sir Patrick Vallance poured cold water on that idea, pointing out that no vaccine can be approved until we know it's completely safe. In an article for The Guardian, he writes, a vaccine has to work, but it also has to be safe. If a vaccine is to be given to billions of people, many of whom may be at low risk from COVID-19, the vaccine must have a good safety profile. Gavin Williamson, the Education Secretary, refused to be drawn on the Sunday Times claims that schools would reopen May 11th. According to several papers today, the earliest they will reopen is after the summer half term, which is June 1st. That's bad news for all sorts of reasons, not least of which is that 2/3 of school children aren't logging on for online lessons, according to a report by the Sutton Trust and Public First. Here's the killer finding, as reported by Camilla Turner in The Telegraph. Half of teachers in private schools said they are receiving more than 3/4 of work back, compared with 27% in the best state schools and just 8% in the least advantaged state schools, sink schools, they call them. Let's see. Several readers have sent me links to articles casting doubt on the reliability of the computer models that epidemiologists, virologists, and mathematicians have been using to predict the impact of the virus. This one by Michael Fumento, which is skeptical about statistical modeling in general, is particularly good. He makes the following points. The CDC's model predicted that 1.4 million people would die from Ebola in Liberia and Sierra Leone 5 years ago. The final death total was less than 8,000. The U.S. Public Health Service predicted that at least 450,000 Americans would be diagnosed with AIDS by the end of 1993. In fact, the number was 17,325. In 2005, Neil Ferguson told The Guardian that up to 200 million people could die from bird flu. Around 40 million people died in 1980's Spanish flu outbreak, he explained. There are 6 times more people on the planet now, so you could scale it up to around 200 million people probably. The final death toll from the avian flu strain AH5N1 was 440. That's 440 people, not 200 million. In 2002, the same Professor Ferguson predicted that mad cow disease could kill up to 50,000 people. It ended up killing less than 200. So again, I mean, the fix is in, right? What other explanation can there be for this? Neil Ferguson's been wrong again and again and again and again. And these models have been proved to be useless, less than useless. But let's go back to the models. Let's go back to Neil Ferguson. We're all going to die, and life as we know it must come to an end. Lucy Fisher reports that Britons are taking a hardline attitude on China over COVID-19. 83% want the UK to push for an international inquiry into China's handling of the outbreak. 74% think the Chinese government to blame for disease spread. I mentioned Peter Hitchens earlier in his Sunday column on the Mail on Sunday. He asks, have 5 weeks of this mad lockdown panic actually done us any good? And it's illustrated with a picture of a police officer who is, of course, a woman wearing those absurd hats and this lurid greenish yellow vest. And she's telling off some man who is laying on the shingle, which is what they have in England instead of a beach. Some police officers have also acted with shocking arrogance, Hitchens writes, and appeared to enjoy it. The harm done by this behavior may never be repaired. I suspect that many of you know this in detail. The pain is spreading fast in the form of strangled business, often small enterprises built on brave risk-taking and mortgaged homes. Many are now sinking into bankruptcy, not because they failed, but because the government's policy killed them. You know, the government's going to say that they were right about this, and the elite will say, yes, they're right. One of the results of this is there's going to be a substantial number of people who define the government as their enemy, their deadly enemy, going forward. Hitchens wrote, it really is time that the cabinet took responsibility for at least limiting this damage. I, for one, will not jeer at them for doing so. When you make a mistake, as we all do, the test is what you do to put it right. I was accused when I warned of this, of not caring about deaths from COVID-19, that this was false. In fact, it poisoned the wells of debate. I pointed out that we also needed to care about the deaths which experts, such as Germany's Professor Sukarit Bhakdi, repeatedly warned would come from closing down both social life and economic activity for any length of time. It was not life versus money, it was life versus life. But we see Patton Oswalt and others, he's not alone in this, making the argument that if you are not in favor of crushing the economy, atomizing society, and limiting civil rights, that makes you Hitler. Yeah, that's the argument that they're actually making. Because Hitler was this kind of laissez-faire, yeah, whatever works for you kind of guy. Another story from Britain, Peter Kay, who's a popular comedian there. He caused a scandal when he made a joke about breastfeeding in public. And I guess I haven't been following this all that closely. The subject Andy Neat responded, for those interested, my wife sent BBC an email and was told they are fictional characters with outdated opinions. Doesn't make it right to say there's a time and place for breastfeeding, though, does it? Breastfeeding is quite literally a sexual act, and it is a tradition in our Western societies that sexual acts take place in private. Pope dreams of post-virus world where inequalities abolished. Yes, Pope Francis is moving apace with his plans to transform the Catholic Church once and for all into an institution fit only for communist traitors and homosexuals. He's urging the faithful to use the coronavirus pandemic's time of trial to prepare for a future where inequalities are abolished and the poorest are no longer left behind. Communism. That's what he's talking about. He's talking about communism. The time has come to eliminate inequalities, to heal the injustice that is undermining the health of the entire human family. Well, Jesus Christ, no less, said that the poor will always be among us. But, what is he to Pope Francis? From pipe dream to prospect, the pandemic is making a case for universal basic income. Let's turn everyone into slaves. Because, that sweet, sweet $1,200 a month. You don't need a job. You don't need any self-respect. That $1,200, it'll buy lots of beans, lots of delicious beans. Let's see. Diane Montagna writes, is this communist China or Italy? How long will the crickets continue from the Italian bishops? And will Pontifex, that's the Pope, intervene? Law enforcement interrupts mass. 6 people present whose family members died of COVID-19, plus cantor, altar boys, and live streamer. Rorit Cayley comments, it will continue and must continue until people start revolting. Catholics must rise up against illegitimate and tyrannical governments. Otherwise, this abuse of natural rights and constitutional rights of these Western democracies will go on indefinitely. Masses are being physically prevented by police in Spain, but Muslim services remain unmolested. So what's happening in Canada? What are the numbers here? And let me get the table. 36,823 cases as of 7 p.m. Eastern time today. 1,690 deaths. To put that in perspective, there are 38 million people in Canada. Now, I mentioned last week that Scott Moe, who is the Premier of Saskatchewan, was making noises about, Saskatchewan going back to work. There are 316 confirmed cases in the province of Saskatchewan, which has a population of 1.1 million, and there are 4 deaths. How can he pretend this is even a crisis, let alone a catastrophe? Well, everyone else is doing it. British Columbia, 1,699 confirmed cases, 86 deaths. 5.1 million people in British Columbia, and there were fewer than 100 deaths. Yes. And when is the lockdown going to end? Well, there's no end in sight, apparently. No end in sight. Even on Vancouver Island, which of course is an island separated from the mainland, and COVID has barely had any kind of an effect on Vancouver Island. Let's see. Oh, we're up over 102 cases in the Island Health region and 2 deaths. And most of the businesses are shut down, which is totally proportionate. Well, there was a mass shooting in Nova Scotia, and it all seems very, very mysterious. It took place in a small village of about 100, and as Faith Goldie's pointed out, how was it possible that this fellow wasn't recognized right from the very beginning? I suggested on Twitter that if Scott Moe wants to be reelected Premier of Saskatchewan, he reopen the province now. Oh, the 313 reported cases, 75 are considered active. 75. It's just a line from Alan Partridge came to mind. This country. Andrew Scheer, who's the Conservative leader, the official opposition leader, he's irresponsible for wanting to resume Parliament amid COVID-19, says Justin Trudeau. Irresponsible. Why do we need the House of Commons? Why do we need people to go to Ottawa? Can't all this be done over the internet? My blood is boiling, Green parliamentary leader Elizabeth May told HuffPost. This is not acceptable. I'm so distressed. It's now obvious that no one should have regular parliament meetings starting tomorrow. See, Trudeau promised April the 20th Parliament would come back, and the Conservatives held them to it. And these weepy, whiny people are they're just sick about it. That Justin Trudeau actually said that, well, you know, Parliament has a purpose, but we have to be responsible about it. Yeah, can you imagine that? The Prime Minister of Canada said that Parliament has a purpose. Yeah, sorry, it has a function. Yes, Parliament has a function, but it has to be done responsibly. You see how easy it is to take over? Just declare martial law just to shut everything down. No, we don't even have a House of Commons working anymore. Because if it saves just one life. Trudeau defends reluctance to question China's conduct during outbreak as other allies air concern. Oh, there's another shocker. This is from the Globe and Mail. China is facing increasing scrutiny over whether it concealed the full extent of COVID-19 infections and deaths, and on Friday revised its virus death toll, adding 1,290 to the total. Dominic Raab, the Foreign Affairs Minister of Britain, who is deputizing for Prime Minister Boris Johnson as he recovers from COVID-19, said this week China will have to answer hard questions on how the coronavirus outbreak happened and whether it could have been prevented. He told reporters it will not be business as usual with China once the pandemic ends. Trudeau, pressed by reporters on Friday to say whether he felt the revised number of deaths from China was evidence Beijing had been covering up the full extent of the COVID-19 damage, declined to answer directly and did not mention China. We need to look carefully at the numbers that are shared by different countries around the world, he told reporters in French. Certainly, there will be conclusions to be drawn in the end regarding the behavior of different countries, but for the moment, we must work together, collaborate, and do everything we can to learn and better protect our citizens at home. The Prime Minister was asked why he is reluctant to question China's handling of the outbreak when politicians in other countries, including the United States, the United Kingdom, and France, are doing so. He said, now is not the time for criticism. Yeah, and it's never going to be the time. Alberta, the Premier of Alberta is my old friend Jason Kenney. And they got martial law there. They got martial law. John Carpe, who I used to know back in the old days. He's a solid fellow. He wrote a piece for the National Post. As though following Machiavellian advice to never let a crisis go to waste, the Alberta government has quickly expanded its own powers under the Public Health Act. Bill 10, which was rushed through the legislature in less than 48 hours, gives cabinet ministers new powers to write de facto laws and create new penalties without the approval of the Legislative Assembly. That Bill 10 already empowered politicians and bureaucrats to take property away from citizens and organizations, to force citizens to render aid, to conscript people to help deal with an emergency, and to enter into any building or property without a warrant. The chief medical officer was already empowered to forcibly quarantine any person who was ill or any person who was caring for a sick family member. Before Bill 10, cabinet ministers were already empowered to suspend the operation of provincial laws in whole or in part once cabinet declared a public health emergency. But now cabinet ministers have acquired the additional power of creating and implementing new orders and penalties simply through ministerial order. Bill 10 has also increased the maximum penalty for disobeying the Public Health Act from $2,000 to $100,000 for a first offense, and from $5,000 to $500,000 for a subsequent offense. The only justification provided by Health Minister Tyler Shandro for these new powers was to strengthen our ability to protect the health and safety of Albertans. Without review or approval of the legislature, a minister can now create a new order requiring people to install tracking devices on their cell phones and requiring them to register their phones with the government. Without any oversight, a minister can create an exclusive list of people who are legally permitted to go outside or legally authorized to drive a vehicle and impose a $1,000 fine on those who walk outside or drive illegally because they are not on the list. The health minister could unilaterally declare that all sick people must be forcibly removed from their homes, as the WHO has suggested. And an order could be issued for mass vaccination without any discussion or debate in the legislature. Jason Kenney, he's one of these liberty guys, you know, freedom, liberty, etc., etc. He's a neocon. You know, that's why America had to smash the Middle East repeatedly, because liberty, the whole world is demanding liberty. Well, apparently the people of Alberta are not demanding liberty, and even if they were, Jason Kenney wasn't going to give it to them. Jason Kenney's in another controversy because the sainted Dr. Theresa Tam, she's been criticized. You will recall that Dr. Tam, who is a native of China, said that coronavirus, not a big deal. You don't want to ban flights from China. And the real problem, wait for it, xenophobia, stigmatization. And Kenney has clashed with Tam over testing, not to wait for a Canadian-approved test and use those approved by, say, the United States or the European Union. You know, said Kenney, this is the same Dr. Tam who was telling us that we shouldn't close our borders to countries with high levels of infection, and who in January was repeating talking points out of the PRC about no evidence of human-to-human transmission. Yeah, this is all true, but we're supposed to believe that Dr. Theresa Tam is a hero, a great woman, perhaps the greatest woman that Canada or China has ever produced, and grossly irresponsible for Jason Kenney to criticize her. Penny Collinette, who was something in the Chrétien government. As we fight the pandemic, it's wrong to play the blame game. This is the kind of writing which gets into Canadian newspapers now. The world's game plan to flatten the COVID-19 curve was recently disrupted as political finger-pointing and personal accusations emerged at international and domestic levels. That paragraph is a disaster. Everything about it is wretched. Oh, okay, get this. Unfortunately, Donald Trump, with his financial assault on the WHO, and Alberta's Premier Jason Kenney, with his personal attack on Dr. Theresa Tam, Canada's Chief Public Health Officer, have been willing to jeopardize the tightrope on which we are balancing. Jeopardize the tightrope? How about, cut, sever, even shake the tightrope? Jeopardize the tightrope on which we are balancing. I don't know why the Toronto Star would even, run this woman's column. She has a column every week. They are all terrible. Oh, I think this is perhaps the ultimate Canadian story. This was from the 12th of April, and it is from the Post-Millennial. In a new policy change, the Canadian Armed Forces, or Canadian Forces, that's what we call our Army, will no longer be using gendered pronouns in official reports. Documents obtained by conservative commentator Aaron Gunn and presented to the Post-Millennial reveal that military personnel are no longer to write he or she, but must replace it with they, them pronouns, regardless of an individual's preferred pronouns. Issued via Canadian Forces General Message, these changes that deprive a person of their sex-based identity in writing are meant to encourage gender diversity. In reports on personnel, no superior will be allowed to use pronouns that designate or refer to a person's biological sex. The notice reads, based on a recent CAF cultural and normative shift to promote gender diversity and associated inclusiveness, CFPAS, which is Canadian Forces Personnel Appraisal System, writing policy and guide will also reflect this new reality where sex, gender identity, and gender expression are prohibited grounds of discrimination under the Canadian Human Rights Act. Forthwith, the use of gender pronouns such as, quote, he, his, and she, her, unquote, are not to be used when drafting PERS. Members will be referred to by rank and name or by using gender-neutral pronouns such as they, their. Reconfirmed. Canada is the gayest country on earth. I don't watch TV. I don't watch daytime TV, but I do know who Ellen DeGeneres is. Apparently, she's beloved. She hosts a chat show in the afternoon. She gets people to dance, you know. Apparently, the ladies like this. She was did CoverGirl ads, what, 7, 8 years ago? She looked like a vampire raccoon. But she seems genial enough, even though apparently she is not like that in real life. Who could have guessed? Replace Ellen DeGeneres with Ellen Page, say 7,000 petitioners. This is from Out magazine. After recently landing in hot water regarding a joke about quarantine, she said that being in her $27 million estate was like being in jail because everyone in here is gay. Whoa, shocking stuff. Talk show host Ellen DeGeneres is making headlines again. No, not really. Now thousands of petitioners are asking that she be replaced on her show by Ellen Page in a campaign that seems partially comedic and partially serious. Ellen Page is a much better Ellen to host the Ellen Show, the petition states bluntly. Ellen DeGeneres is a hetero that just happens to be gay. Ellen Page is a much better host because she is way more gay. Although we know that no queer is more gay than another, and that hetero that just happens to be gay isn't a thing, the criticisms no doubt come after a series of similar criticisms from more progressive alphabet people, including this very publication. DeGeneres has been criticized for befriending the notoriously anti-alphabet people, former President George W. Bush, as well as defending her fellow comedian Kevin Hart's messy homophobic past, particularly when this probably wasn't her place. For some, the sequence of events has seen DeGeneres' status as a queer icon unravel over the past year or so, and I'm sure she's terribly worried about that. Ellen DeGeneres may be an unpleasant person, but that's not how she presents on TV. Ellen Page, she does not seem like a pleasant person at all. Also, she appears to have hit the wall before she turned 30 years old. Why would middle America watch a TV show hosted by an angry, unpleasant-looking lesbian? That doesn't make any sense to me. Okay, finally, I want to talk about Dan Harmon. Dan Harmon was creator of Community, which is my favorite ever television show. He's also the creator of Rick and Morty, which is a show which has its moments, but I can't say I'm that much of a fan. Dan Harmon, his romantic life has been much publicized, often to his embarrassment, but now he's just been humiliated. And by who? By his girlfriend, because that's what you expect a girlfriend to do, to humiliate you in public for money. This is from Entertainment Weekly. Anna Kendrick has been through a lot. Really? And now she's got to deal with her on-screen boyfriend cheating on her with a sex doll. In a wild new trailer for the Quibi show Dummy, aspiring writer Cody finds glitter on her partner's Donald Logue's bed, but it isn't another woman he's been involved with. It's a talking feminist sex doll with feelings. But as the doll says, we're all sex dolls until we topple the patriarchy. After a therapist tells Cody she needs to embrace the sex doll to heal herself, she and her new friend embark on a road trip full of bonding, dance sessions, pee breaks, and personal breakthroughs. Just the pause never stops. A fun-loving sex doll and her human friend take on the world together. That would make an amazing story, the doll says in the trailer. Well, we'll have to see if that's true when the show premieres today. Created and written by Cody Heller. Cody, you can't even change the name? Is inspired by her life with fiancé Dan Harmon, the creator of Rick and Morty. Kendrick and Heller executive produced the series alongside Trisha Brock, who also serves as director. My boyfriend at the time, he's now my fiancé, really did have a sex doll, and I knew about it, and it was something that was occupying my mind, she said. It all merged in this creative way of me imagining the sex doll came to life, and that she became my writing partner. I took the things that were really happening in my real life and put them on the page. I found at least 3 stories about this. Here's another one from the Daily Beast. Inside the hilarious show about a famous Hollywood boyfriend's sex doll. Cody Heller opens up about Dummy, which is based on Heller coming to terms with a real-life boyfriend, Dan Harmon's sex doll. Let's see. When Cody Heller began dating Dan Harmon, the outre creator of the television series shows Community and Rick and Morty, they made a pact. This time would be different. The freshly minted couple made a commitment to total honesty, especially when it came to sex. They consumed and critiqued porn together and confessed their deepest, darkest sexual kinks. One of the things that came out of that was that Dan telling me that he had a sex doll. Heller initially brushed it off as a sexually curious and open-minded person herself, and of course she is. Who is she to judge? But the thought of the doll haunted her. I found myself thinking about her a lot. Whereas Dan saw it as an it and an object, I saw her as a person. I found myself applying a personality to her, humanizing her, and feeling jealous, asking myself, do I live up to her? Am I as pretty as her? Are you crazy? Am I as pretty as a doll? What is she like? I became obsessed with this doll and was taking up a lot of my mental space. In her novel, Loitering with Intent, Muriel Spark says that total honesty between 2 people is always a mistake, and indeed it is. So imagine that you're Dan Harmon, and you have this disgusting little kink that you have a sex doll, and oh yeah, I probably shouldn't let my new girlfriend know about this. Yeah, no. Total honesty, and then she sells them out. Oh man, this would be great. Yeah, I'm gonna write something about Dan Harmon's sex doll, and the character's gonna be called Cody, just like I'm called Cody. And since he's a famous person, so there'll be tremendous interest in this. How long is this relationship going to last for? That how could this be anything other than totally mortifying? Anyway, let's have a final look at the chat here. I don't know. Dan Harmon has brought this on himself, I suppose, but yeah, don't fall for that total honesty thing with a person that is going to be looking for a way to make money off your problems. Don from Beyond says, at last I find common ground with Alex. I also detest sticks. I don't know. I never really felt all that strongly about them one way or the other. Paul Backman says, has KMG gotten an apartment? No, this is still the same hotel room that I've been in for a couple of weeks. Let's see. Sticks has horrible takes. Sticks' wife is gorgeous. Oh, are we talking about someone? We're not talking about the band Styx. We're talking about some other Styx. I don't know who that is. Oh, Ramsey is right, by the way. This is something to do with Ramsey Paul. Seek and Destroy 99 says, honestly, sex dolls are more appealing than this generation of women. That would be a very sad view to have. Because, I don't know, there's the uncanny valley effect, and the media keeps trying to sell us sex dolls. What's a perfectly normal thing to do. Yeah, again, why do we need other people? Why do we need other people? You can just, ejaculate into plastic. So, women, unnecessary. It's revolting, These people need to be replaced, absolutely replaced. that there is no aspect of human life that they will not degrade. Not one single aspect of it. Manfred von Thistlebaum says, after watching Ellen's latest vid, I'm convinced she is actually Roger Stone. I'll wrap up with the story about Ellen DeGeneres, that she had her sitcom, and there were rumors going around that her character on the sitcom and herself that was going to come out as gay. What was this? This was about 1994, 95, maybe 96. And there was an enormous amount of interest in this story. And at the time, I thought that Ellen DeGeneres was, I don't know, kind of attractive. So just Ellen DeGeneres all the time, in the countdown to the supposed reveal. And so one night I have this dream about Ellen DeGeneres. And, we're going at it pretty hot and heavy. And then she breaks off and she says, I'm sorry, I just can't do this with a man. And then I woke up thinking that I'd let down the side. Anyway, that's the show for tonight. If you like the show or any part of it, I'd appreciate it if you click on the like button. Subscribe to my YouTube channel if you haven't already. If you would like to support the show, my PayPal address is kevin_grace@hotmail.com. And once again, I leave you with my heartfelt wish that in this time of total atomization, that you all manage to find some actual human contact. Good night.